In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
In his final public speech, a farewell address, no less, in a time when every second on TV was priceless, United States President Dwight D. Eisenhower decided not to brag about his victory in the Korean War. Instead, he cashed in all his chips to warn this nation of a hidden enemy.
We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications.
When I was with Lawrence Rockefeller at his ranch in 1993, he turned to me and he said, "The implications of this are so vast and so profound that no aspect of life on Earth will be unchanged by its disclosure." I said, "Yes, Lawrence, that's why it's been kept secret. It's not because it's trivial, it's because the implications are so profound." So there have been attempts to bring this information out for over 60 years. And here we sit in 2012 with the world still burning oil and gas and coal, when we have had technologies, sciences, and all the information we need to have had a completely new civilization.
What Eisenhower warned us about over 60 years ago, according to Steve Greer, has long become truth in Washington, D.C.
We could get rid of smog, we could get rid of pollution. You wouldn't even need solar panels at this point. We could change transportation in a microsecond. The way we build homes would be completely different. The way we govern our lives would be completely different.
And all the literally hundreds of trillions of dollars in assets that are in coal, natural gas, uranium, nuclear power, public utilities, they're all obsolete.
When we go outside and we look at our cars, we look at our airplanes, we're already looking at dinosaur technology. It's laughable where we are right now. We should be at least 100 years ahead of where we are right now.
And there are still files on this issue classified, top secret, from 100 years ago, for the same reasons. Because the macroeconomic order of fossil fuels, petrodollar, a handful of industrial elites and corporations be completely transformed. But the folks who actually call the shots in the multi-trillion-dollar global economy, they don't want to see that happen.
They know that if that power was, delineated to the average person, we wouldn't need them anymore.
They don't want it today, and the likes of J.P. Morgan and others back 100 years ago didn't want it.
The U.S. Federal Reserve Bank issues every dollar bill. Yet it is not run by the U.S. government or any elected official. It is owned by a private banking cartel.
But here I find the chairman of the Federal Reserve, who's in charge of the dollar, in charge of the money, in charge of what the money supply is going to be. The middle class is being wiped out, and nobody's understanding that it has to do with the value of money. Prices are going up. So how are you able to defend this policy of deliberate depreciation of our money?
A lot of it depends on what happens to the price of oil.
The four horsemen, or families of banking who own and run the Federal Reserve, also run the four largest oil companies. Oil is also used to make and run machinery and current mechanical technology. Of course, there's one industry that needs these more than anyone else: the military-industrial complex.
The event at Roswell, because it resulted in the acquisition of materiel that could be studied, it created a sea change in the whole national security organization, because within weeks of that event, the CIA was formed. Within weeks, there was the formation of the Air Force, which was split off from the Army Air Force. It also led, however, the development of unacknowledged special access projects, which is why Eisenhower, even though he knew about the subject on a fairly deep level, had completely lost control of it by 1961 when he left office.
The problem is not proving that UFOs exist. It's when you begin to expose the energy and propulsion systems behind how they're getting here. You're talking about unveiling an entirely new science that would replace oil, gas, coal, nuclear power, public utilities. And this is the $600 trillion problem.
We have lost 100 years of evolution on planet Earth. A true lost century. Huge progress was made in the 1920s as Nikola Tesla developed energy generation technologies that could power the Earth, drawing endless free energy from the so-called empty space around us.
So-called empty space isn't really empty at all. It's actually full of energy. So instead of being like kind of a quiet, empty lake, it's more like the froth at the base of a waterfall or something.
The amount of energy in a cubic meter of space-time was 10 to the 26th power, so 10 with 26 zeros behind it, joules per cubic meter. And that's enough energy, even in a coffee cup, to boil all the oceans of the Earth completely away into steam.
When they found out that Tesla had passed away in the Hotel New Yorker, they came in, they had the manager of the hotel open the safe, and they took all of Tesla's papers.
So many modes of converting quantum vacuum energy or zero-point energy.
Some people think they know how to do it. Okay, fine. But if you do it theoretically, that's one thing. But then you got to do it experimentally, and that's the hard part.
Those opposed to new energy technologies can tie the hands of hundreds of inventors. But how will they ever fare against tens of thousands?
The output milliamperage is more than the input milliamperage. It's a clear indicator of over-unity.
I'm gonna ask you to look away. I love my hands, but it hurts to pray. The life I have isn't what I'd seen. The sky's not blue and the field's not green. Wait for me. Wait for me. Wait for me. Wait
A local inventor has discovered a way, hear this, to use water to run your car.
What Stan shared with me was interesting.
In order to run this engine off of water, we've also had to learn the ability to adjust the burn rate of hydrogen to co-equal the fossil fuels.
So he applies for a patent, and then he gets a call from actually a visitation by two guys from the Pentagon.
The Pentagon flew a lieutenant colonel in last week to look at Meyer's invention. There's talk of possibly using it in the Star Wars defense program and to run army tanks.
But he asked that this become a public patent so that the civilians could benefit from it. And he indicated that if we don't do that, overseas people will.
A local inventor has discovered a way, hear this, to use water to run your car.
It's a major breakthrough that will no doubt make motorists happy. And as Ralph Robinson explains, the Pentagon is also showing lots of interest in this project.
A lot of people don't realize that Stan Meyer had a toroidal, a donut-shaped object that put out many times more energy than you had to put into it because it was tapping into this zero-point quantum vacuum energy field. That had a national security order on it before he even got it to patent. It was seized and shut down.
In 1996, Meyer was sued by his investors, who claimed the device was not revolutionary despite verification of the unique voltage intensifier circuit by the U.S. Patent Office. Meyer was brought to trial, but key evidence was not allowed. His oral testimony was not even recorded due to an audio recorder malfunction, and the judge recessed early for vacation. Later, Meyer made an appeal but was denied. He was found guilty of fraud and ordered to repay his investors, putting an immediate dent on the idea of funding new technology. On March 20th, 1998, Stanley joined his brother and two NATO officials for a dinner meeting. Stan took a sip of cranberry juice, grabbed his neck, ran out of the restaurant, and fell to the ground, saying, "They poisoned me." The police report confirms his words. The cause of death was written to be an aneurysm, though he left behind just enough materials for others to piece together his process. The full secrets of his device died with him.
Unfortunately, when you start to deal with inventors who have anomalous results that seem to be over unity, paranoia seems to accompany that process. And John Searle's famous for having a circular magnetic device that has both energy and propulsion built into one unit.
And the electric company felt that this guy was stealing money, took him to court, went to jail, his house caught fire, and all of his property and all of his designs burned.
These sciences have been around for decades. They have been ruthlessly kept secret because of the kleptocracy of what I call the petrofascists, the people who are hell-bent on maintaining the power of a centralized petrodollar, oil, gas, coal system.
We actually reprinted a report on the military involvement of the Department of Energy. And it's so extensive, it's the major operation that goes on there.
There have been over 5,000 patents that have been sequestered by the national security state, taken out of the public domain. Many of them deal with energy technologies.
It's a policy that the military seems to feel is necessary for national security. However, at this point, we often wonder, 50 years after World War II and the Cold War, whether such sequestering is necessary.
Suppression of new technology would be an obvious plague on the idea and strength of a free market system. Yet, it still seems to happen right in front of our eyes.
The concept of freedom, this sort of idea of people having the liberty to pursue happiness and to pursue abundance, this has been completely in a sense, turned upside down.
The implications of free energy go far beyond keeping the lights on in your home or running your car without gasoline. Most of the cost of making anything, from growing food to constructing a skyscraper, is the energy used to mine the raw materials out of the ground. Ship, process, ship again, package, and deliver. A free energy society, in which the cost of manufacturing and agriculture move towards zero, would mean endless abundance for everyone on Earth. A century of artificial scarcity has produced a destabilized, dehumanized, war-torn world, where the power and wealth have been transferred from the many to the hands of the few.
If you take that on, you're going to run into the mother of all buzzsaws in terms of the national security state.
Some of the breakthroughs in the past have been deliberately suppressed.
One of the most important of all the meetings was with CIA Director R. James Woolsey.
Here I fly up to Washington. The cover story was a dinner party. One of the things that I found was that this CIA director wasn't lying when he communicated to us that he had not had access to these projects. He was shaken to his core. We met for not 20 minutes, almost 3 hours. And by the end of it, I handed him, my hands were shaking, I handed him this document, and it was a position paper recommending executive orders and the things the Clinton administration and he needed to do to get control of this mess. And he looked at it, and he looked at me. He says, yes, he says, but how do we disclose that which we have no access to?
Dr. Greer approached many D.C. officials in an attempt to gain an audience. One of the people who took him seriously was former CIA Director Bill Colby.
If there's truth in it, there can be a danger in that situation. We've seen that happen in other cases. I said, you have to consider the possibility of some danger to not only your reputation, but to your person. I mean, people do react rather violently to some kinds of charges, or particularly if they're true.
Certain USAPs are waived and also completely managed and controlled by private contractors, so they enjoy the secrecy protections only afforded to private corporations. There is virtually no high-level government oversight for these types of USAPs. In many cases, no elected official, including even the president, have knowledge a particular USAP even exists. Between 1947 and 1949, the government passed the National Security Act and the CIA Act. These laws allowed the intelligence community to withdraw money from any agency without disclosure. Essentially, money could be stolen from any program, and no elected official would ever know about it.
Cold fusion patents have not been approved. They will not get through. American citizens are being denied their constitutional rights. I inadvertently was looking through some piles of paper that had been given to me in a casual manner by all these hot fusion physicists as they were trying to do their calorimetric repeat of the Pons-Fleischmann experiment. And I was stunned. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It looked like monkey business to me at the time, and it has turned out to be exactly that. It was represented as a negative result when it was positive. And that data is scientific fraud, as far as I'm concerned. It's been referred to legal authorities in the government. I asked for a review at MIT, got nowhere. If this type of manipulation had occurred in any legitimate research area, such as cancer research, AIDS research, global warming research, anything that's accepted as reasonable to be researching, the people would lose their jobs, they wouldn't be in science. And yet, these people today, their data is used today, to year 2000, and all before, to reject patents. Yes, there is serious criminal activity going on that ultimately must be rooted out.
On June 28, 2001, 3 months before the 9/11 attacks, William Cooper made some unbelievable predictions on a radio broadcast. He stated that an attack on American soil would be blamed on Osama bin Laden before bin Laden was infamous or well recognized at all. Cooper was found shot dead in his home 2 months after the 9/11 attack.
It is hard to concretely prove that 9/11 was a false flag attack because the people behind it are so good at covering their tracks, especially with the compliance of mainstream media. If you had trillions of dollars, you'd be pretty good at it too.
The adversary is closer to home. It's the Pentagon bureaucracy. According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions. $2.3 trillion in transactions.
According to the Comptroller General of the United States, there are serious financial management problems at the Pentagon. Fiscal year 1999, 2.3 trillion missing. Fiscal year 2000, 1.1 trillion missing. And DOD is the #1 reason why the government can't balance its checkbook. I would like for you to respond to the questions that I've put to you today.
I've forgotten what the second question was.
My 03 budget calls for more than $48 billion in new defense spending.
More money for the Pentagon when its own auditors admit the military cannot account for 25% of what it already spends. $2.3 trillion with a T. That's $8,000 for every man, woman, and child in America.
World Trade Center 7 was the largest CIA headquarters and housed offices which were investigating stock and accounting fraud. Building 7 was also the first building to be cleaned up, and all evidence from the building was destroyed.
Spending well over $100 million per day on classified programs that have no congressional oversight, no public scrutiny. There's no monitor of these programs. A number of these programs go directly through Congress, totally.
The public has to understand there began to be this bifurcation, this separation between legitimate national security and military operations and the deep black programs that are unacknowledged. We're talking about the black budget, the deep black, super secret, unacknowledged budget that runs in the $100 to $200 billion a year. I'm being conservative.
A shadowy government with its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own fundraising mechanism, and the ability to pursue its own ideas of the national interest, free from all checks and balances, and free from the law itself.
And if people think that the Congress and the President actually have a handle on this, they're gravely mistaken. They do not. This is where we get into the structure of secrecy. And in this document, first document that's on the briefing for President Obama's brief we put together that we gave to John Podesta, this document lists the compartmented operations out of the Nellis facility, what the public wrongly calls Area 51. I gave this document to the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Tom Wilson. Now this is J2. This is the guy who puts the intelligence briefings together for the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States of America. And he got hold of one of these compartments and he said, "Hello, I'm Admiral Tom Wilson. I want to be read into or briefed on this project." They said, "Yes, sir, we know who you are, and you don't have a need to know." You don't have a need to know. The head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So this is where the military have been victims of the secrecy.
In some of these cases, absolutely, the president has no need to know because he's a temporary employee. He's strictly a temporary employee. He does not have a need to know on some of these deeper black programs within the Skunk Works, within the Boeing Phantom Works, and also within the Black Widow group of Northrop. What do you do? Do you talk to your congressman? Do you write your senator? Do you march on the White House lawn? What good is that going to do if the people who run this government don't have access to the programs? They're not cleared for it. So that's just not the direction to go.
Based upon what Jimmy Carter has said and based upon what Bill Clinton has said, that they were refused this information. I believe that is unconstitutional for them to refuse to give the information to the President of the United States.
People who did not agree with this extraordinary secrecy and made trouble for them ended up having horrific things happen.
He was talking about being erased. And I said, "Man," I said, "what do you mean erased?" He said, "Yes." He said, "You will be erased."
If you tell anyone who is not in this room about this project, this bullet has your name on it and it will find you. Most dangerous thing going on the planet today isn't ISIS, it's not Iraq, it's not Russia, it's not China. It's a out of control, covert group that is not being overseen by the people, the Congress, or the President. Within a couple months of me briefing the CIA director, I get a visit from one of Bill Clinton's good friends to my home who says, "They love what you're recommending, that the President do executive orders to declassify and bring all this information out." This man comes to my house and says, "They really think that's a great idea. The President won't do it, it's too dangerous." And I said, "Well, he's the President. He didn't want to be President, he shouldn't have taken on the responsibility and sworn an oath to the Constitution." And he says, "Yeah, but you don't understand. They don't think that they can protect the President." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he's sitting at the dinner table with my children. And he says, "Well, they're concerned that President Clinton will end up like Jack Kennedy." And I start laughing. I really started laughing out loud because I thought, this is nonsense. This is like conspiracy kookville. He says, "No, this is absolutely their concern."
And gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And there is very grave danger, for we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
So these unacknowledged special access projects do not care what your rank and position is. They care about one thing. Will you go along with their agenda?
The aliens won't let it happen. You reveal all their secrets. They exercise strict control over us.
Now, you know, there are a lot of people that are going to examine your facial expressions here, every twitch, everything, and say, and of course, so did you look? Did you see? Did you explore?
I can't reveal anything.
Oh, really? Because President Clinton said he did go right in, and he did check, and there was nothing.
Well, you know, that's what we're instructed to say.
The structure of secrecy extends to the scientific and academic arenas, where a deliberate effort to spread disinformation has been going on for decades. From professional debunkers to CIA-funded committees, our trusted academics and scientists have been complicit in the secrecy.
This is a document talking about the current program at the CIA. And it says that the PAO, Public Affairs Office, has relationships with reporters from every underlying major wire service, newspaper, news weekly, and television network in the nation. In many instances, we have persuaded reporters to postpone, change, hold, or even scrap stories that could have adversely affected national security.
You are fake news.
So every news agency, every television, radio station in the Albuquerque, Santa Fe area had our snitches in there. So we knew, and we paid them. We paid them good money. One of the reasons you get the people is you pay them, and that was controversial. That was somewhat controversial.
You know of national media that have had
yes, yeah. I'm not going to name them.
The corruption of the media means that you have then undermined democracy and our basic constitutional protections.
Now, this has worked for 50 years. Why would they change it now? This is the technique they've used.
Now, what's the purpose of this? The CIA has no mandate for anything domestic. The FBI is domestic. What the hell is this?
Where are we now? We are in a bread and circus. This is a phrase used to describe the creation of public approval, not through excellent public policy, but rather through diversion and distraction.
No, I'm not doing that. I'm sorry. You are driving me nuts. That's ridiculous.
Keep people fat, keep them happy, keep them diverted, and keep them entertained with drivel and shock and nonsense. That's, unfortunately, the sort of thing that has taken the place of news and information.
So that what we're seeing today is a world in which perception is being managed by as little as 5 major media corporations who collectively control magazines, newspapers, corporate news websites, television stations, movies, documentaries.
World Trade Center 7, next to the Twin Towers, collapsed at 5:20 p.m., more than 7 hours after the second tower fell. No planes hit the building whatsoever and was only damaged slightly by fire. The BBC reported the building as collapsed live on air 20 minutes before it actually collapsed. The report even showed Building 7 behind the reporter as she documented the collapse.
Who are these people? Who could be behind the curtain? Who could possibly be controlling us so effectively?
One of the most powerful elements of the structure of secrecy has to do with the infiltration and control over mainstream media.
It's a media of belief,
A media of belief. The whole media is controlled by a few corporations thanks to deregulation by the FCC.
You mean Disney, Fox, Westinghouse, and good old GE?
They own networks from CBS to CNBC.
They can use them to say whatever they please and put down the opinions of anyone who disagrees.
Then why is CNN constantly like Russia this, Russia that?
Because it's ratings.
But honestly, you think the whole Russia shit is just like bullshit?
It's mostly bullshit right now. Like, we don't have any big giant proof.
I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Because of the attack of fake news and attacking our network, I just want to ask you, sir.
I'm changing it from fake news, though.
Doesn't that undermine...
Very fake news.
I know, but aren't you...
Even if Russia was trying to swing an election, we try to swing their elections. We're in our CIA and doing shit all the time.
Fake news. We start our American Pravda investigations inside America's media with Part 1, CNN. Our goal is to expose the real motivations behind the decision-making process at our dominant media corporations. Fake news. One story has monopolized President Trump's time in office like no other, especially on CNN. Russia. In fact, since the inauguration, CNN has mentioned Russia on their air nearly 16,000 times.
Because of...
So, my boss, I shouldn't say this, my boss a couple days yesterday, we were having a discussion about this dental shoot, and he's like, I just want you to know what we're up against here. And he goes, just to give you some context, President Trump pulled out of the climate accords, and for a day and a half we covered the climate accords, and the CEO of CNN said in our internal meeting, he said, good job everybody covering the climate accords, but we're done with it, let's get back to Russia.
The CEO?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
So even the climate accords, he was like, okay, a day or so, but we're moving back to Russia.
So it's, I mean, I understand it's all ratings, right?
Oh, it's a business. It's a business. People are like, the media has like an ethical, but all the nice cutesy little ethics that used to get talked about in journalism school, you're just like, that's adorable. That's adorable. Yeah, this is a business. Especially cable news, you know. Cable news isn't the New York Times, and it's not even like NBC News. I mean, NBC News still gets 20 million viewers a night. Cable news is getting 1 million. So, like they gotta do what they gotta do to make their money, I think. And so I love the news business, but I
find it so
I'm
fascinating.
very cynical about it. At the same time, so are most of my colleagues.
Yeah, it's like
I'm not alone.
I think that there are a lot of like liberal CNN viewers who want to see Trump really get scrutinized, and I think if we would have behaved that way with President Obama and scrutinized everything that he was doing with as much scrutiny as we applied to Donald Trump, I think our viewers would have been turned off. I think they would have thought like we were attacking him. But I think our viewers right now, and I'm not saying all of our viewers are like super liberals. Right. I think there's just a lot of them. And
so Trump's good for business, you're saying?
Trump is good for business right now.
But honestly, you think the whole Russia shit is just like bullshit?
Could be bullshit. I mean, it's mostly bullshit right now. Like, we don't have any big giant proof. But then they say, well, there's still an investigation going on. And you're like, yeah. I don't know. If you were finding something, we'd know about it. The way these leaks happen, they'd leak it. It'd leak. If there was something really good, it would leak.
Yeah. It would have leaked before voting, I would say. If anything was good out there, it would have came out already.
Yeah, the leaks keep leaking, and there's so many great leaks, and it's amazing, and I just refuse to believe that if they had something really good like that wouldn't leak, because we've been getting all these other leaks, so I just feel like they don't really have it, but they want to keep digging.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the president is probably right to say, like, look, you are witch hunting me, like, You have no smoking gun. You have no real proof.
Their enthusiasm to report false news is getting the better of them. On Saturday, CNN imposed strict internal restrictions on all future Russia stories after they had to delete and retract a story that was poorly sourced. And yesterday, 3 CNN staffers resigned, victims of fake news. So where does that leave us? The American people are fed up with fake news, and a mainstream media they cannot trust. It's corporate greed, market pressures, managers without integrity, newsroom bosses without courage, journalists who don't even leave their desks. The very purpose of journalism is to expose the world for what it is, not to create false political narratives in order to make money. The American people are frustrated because they have nowhere left to go to get actual information. This is just part 1 of the CNN series. We have so much more that we will bring you on video as our American Pravda investigations continue. Every dishonest television network, newspaper, and social media company is now on notice. You're being watched. We're coming after you. And while the whole broken, rotten media machine may not come tumbling down, maybe they'll wake up.
So I graduated from the UCLA School of Engineering in 1976. I got a flyer from the School of Engineering inviting me to a lecture by Ben Rich.
Ben Rich was the director of Lockheed's Skunk Works for 16 years. He oversaw a number of USAPs that were secretly managed at the Skunk Works, including, most notably, the development of the F-117 stealth fighter.
Ben shared a slide set of about 40 slides of different things, starting with the U-2 spy plane, going all the way up to the stealth fighter at that time, mentioning that he couldn't talk about the other secret stuff. But when he ended his talk, he had a slide of a black disc zipping off into outer space. And he ended his talk with these words: "We now have the technology to take ET home."
We now have the technology to take E.T. home. Ben Rich, CEO, Lockheed Skunk Works.
It is being covered up, but probably not for the reasons you might think.
Within the intelligence communities, they have something called ace in the hole technologies.
So secret they didn't even talk about it.
Oh, we have things flying in the Nevada desert that are 50 years beyond what you could comprehend. If you've seen it on Star Wars or Star Trek, we've been there, done that, or decided it wasn't worth the effort. So that's coming from Ben Rich.
And in this document from the Canadian government, the matter is the most highly classified subject in the United States government, rating higher than the H-bomb. That was the most top secret doomsday weapon at the time in development. And the second item, B, flying saucers exist, period. C, their modus operandi is unknown, but concentrated effort is being made by a small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush. And then D, the entire matter is considered by the United States authorities to be of tremendous significance. What is more sensitive than the development of the hydrogen bomb prior to its detonation? The UFO issue.
What they've done is they've formed this alliance among themselves of the industry that makes money by building war machines, the military that uses the war machines and justifies them, and then the intelligence community that is not really an intelligence community, it's a covert operations community, armed with military weapons and nuclear weapons, in that they're trying to push the boundaries now of establishing their dominion and full spectrum dominance over the planet.
And from the very first meeting I had with the Director of Central Intelligence, I didn't need to convince him that the UFOs were real. I mean, in fact, I pulled out all this dispositive evidence that Carl Sagan would want to see. And he said, I already know this is real. But I want to know why I, the CIA Director, James Woolsey, and the President of the United States aren't being told anything about it. The why is always the hardest question to ask, and nobody asks it.
The problem is not proving that UFOs exist. It's when you begin to expose the energy and propulsion systems behind how they're getting here. You're talking about unveiling an entirely new science that would replace oil, gas, coal, nuclear power, public utilities. And this is the $600 trillion problem.
Technologies will change the macroeconomic system. Because visualize for a moment, you're at your home, all your power needs are being provided from one of these zero-point or quantum vacuum energy systems. Your car is running, never has to be plugged in. You then can have agriculture and manufacturing locally that has very little cost to it. And this is not just in the US, but in places that aren't yet developed, the so-called third world or developing world. They're going to leapfrog right over the smokestack industries and go to high-tech, real high-tech, just like they've skipped over telephone lines and gone to smartphones. This will be a tide that will lift all ships. The world will be increasingly interconnected, and yet on the local level, be completely self-sufficient, every village, every home. And this is something that is the biggest change economically in the history of the human race.
It's a big nut to crack, but I think that if you could do that, I think that people would stop looking at each other with a certain level of hostility like we do now.
I guess it's kind of corny, but it's that bright future that I see that we could all attain if just a few things could be changed.
A false flag operation, also known as a false indication and warning, is a military tactic in which you create the illusion of a threat, often by attacking yourself and blaming the desired enemy. It's proven extremely effective at uniting the public around a perceived threat.
We did it in the Gulf of Tonkin in Vietnam, where we exaggerated, if not completely staged, an attack on our naval vessels so we would stampede President Johnson and the Congress into vastly expanding the Vietnam conflict to benefit, guess who, the military-industrial complex and the war profiteers. You can look at Iraq, concocted all kinds of false information about weapons of mass destruction, which Saddam Hussein did not have, and it was known in intelligence circles he didn't have. Fracture that whole part of the world, and now we have ISIS. So we have to realize the machinations and manipulations that go on behind the scenes leave us very vulnerable. This is why it's time for the people to lead the whole ending of the secrecy and do the disclosure.
wresting power from the hands of these powerful oligarchs and corporations is going to require a revolution.
Could be why Eisenhower's final message wasn't just doom and gloom. It was a charge to the people to spit out the bread, look away from the circus, and take some responsibility.
Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals.
What we've come to learn is this. We are standing at the precipice of a new age. There is power in the many, but only when they're acting as one. That's when resonance happens. Whether joining together as a responsible citizenry against the forces standing to divide us,